Hello, good afternoon, and good morning. It's a great day to be here. It's Ed Bailey with Cribl. We got Brenden from CDW. We are here to talk about how data is a security problem. Brenden, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Afternoon for me, but good afternoon from everyone. Brenden Morgenthaler here. Work at CDW as a solutions architect on the Splunk SIEM team. Been doing security focused work for the last 15 years here.
It's great to have you here.
Thank
Y'all
you.
have done an amazing job helping customers solve common problems around data, lack of data, incomplete data, bad data. It simply just doesn't matter what kind of SIM you have, even something that's as cool as Splunk. If you just don't have if you don't have the right data, it's a pervasive and common problem.
Exactly. And not only is it a common problem, it's becoming a bigger problem as data increases. More systems, more clouds, multi-cloud. You got this tool over in Amazon, this tool over in Google, this one over in Azure. Now I need all that data, and your logging goes up. Licensing is not competing to it, and you're missing data then, or you don't have the right data. It's a continual systemic problem.
Yeah, totally. And it's a real issue. Too often, security teams are having to make choices about, okay, we're going to drop data, we're going to have data, we're going to have to compromise and potentially harm our posture because of these issues.
Exactly. Actually, story on that if you want. So one of the things my former team did that I was on, the offensive security team, was red teams, pen tests, and they had a something called a purple team, where a blue team engineer, a SIEM engineer, and an attacker went in together with a client and worked together to see if they were detecting things in their network. You know, specifically, we go through like the MITRE ATT&CK framework and test common threat actors that would be targeting that business vertical, and constantly running into visibility issues. The one that sticks to my mind is the Kerberos events. And if you're in the security realm, you've heard of Kerberosing. But then you also, so they had all their data coming in, and actually they had it going through Cribl too. Going into Splunk in this instance, and I've seen it other tools, going in, and they were like, the red team engineer with me completely compromised the domain, had full control. And I'm like, okay, guys, did you see any of this? They're like, no, we have nothing.
Right.
We dug into it. And basically, it wasn't even Cribl. It was even before Cribl even got into it. In the domain, they'd turn off all audit events on Kerberos.
Right.
So
Too much data.
Too much data. Yep. But by doing that too much data, not only does Kerberosing use Kerberos, but there's a ton of other attacks that can do, just basic brute forcing. You can totally skip NTLM and your basic brute force detection, which they had set up to say, hey, somebody is brute forcing this account, by going directly against Kerberos. So they went, the engineer went against that. They never detected that he was brute forcing these accounts. Now, found accounts with weak passwords. We won't even get into that discussion.
Right.
And then simply did a Kerberos, no visibility whatsoever. Huge gaping hole. And then when they started getting in that, there's other ones. And again, you got to have visibility into almost all areas of your network to detect these attacks.
Right.
But you have to have like somebody from CDW's team, SIEM team here that knows attack vectors and can help you out. Because if you just say, oh, this is too many events, I need to reduce this, and I don't need these aren't important. It might not look important, but in threat hunting, they give you very important clues and extra data to, whatever you want to call it, to enrich the event detection, enrich your correlation, because you can correlate that event with a network connection event and say, okay, here's where something suspicious is going on.
And that's crucial. You see this, I mean, PowerShell is another good example of a luminous data source that's incredibly important. And I think that's Yeah, DNS is another one. I see DNS gets skipped all the time because bad data. I mean, don't get me started about Windows DNS logging. Incomplete
Oh, I got a
data.
good one for you on that one too.
Oh, sure, go for it.
So Unbound, if you're familiar with that on the Linux side, Mac,
Oh, yeah.
everything with DNSSEC. I'm playing here with at home and talk about bad data. I turn on query logging. Okay, I can see all the queries that are being made. Fantastic. And this is, by the way, on OpenSense. I'm looking at it, looking through it. Wait a second. There's the query. There's the source. Here's the return code. Success or not success comes from cachers. But where's the result?
All right.
So it doesn't even log the results of the query. So I'm like, well, that's half of that transaction that's not visible.
Oh, yeah. And these are the kind of things teams have to deal with, though. Windows DNS debug logs is incredibly poorly formatted, and those are but those are crucial data sources. So I think the question is, how do you help security teams gather all these data sources, the right data sources, but also weed out the trash? And I think that's historically been a long-term problem.
It has. I've been doing, like I said, 15 years, well, 16 last weekend at CDW. And from the get-go, it's always been when logging and monitoring finally started, people started realizing, hey, we need more logs.
Right.
It was always, okay, one, data retention.
Yep.
Or data storage. Then how long can we record it? And then what do we need? And making sure you had the fidelity to do your detection. And honestly, with CDW, that's one of the things I love doing here is with CDW's delivery side, we have somebody in almost every technology that knows the product. So I come in on a SIEM engagement and say, okay, we're looking at this data. Where do we need? How do we get this data? What data do we not need? A good example, classic Cisco ASA, when you had the old, well, they're still called ASAs, VPN connection, and you wanted some of the more information on that VPN connection. It's a debug log. Well, you don't have to turn on debug. You just have to raise the level for that event up to informational. So you don't have to have all the other debug logs polluting your source and polluting your data. So little things like that. With the breadth of CDW, I can just say, hey, I know a guy on Microsoft. I need a guy on Cisco, Palo Alto, Aruba, name it. And I can probably find somebody and bring them in to help our clients go, okay, let's get the right data coming from the right device. And then let's start looking at data and going to the pen testers going, okay, how do we detect your attack? List the attacks out and then get it into the data.
Yeah, totally. So prior to y'all starting to implement Cribl, how did y'all handle that flood of data coming in from all these systems and all these different formats?
Well, coming from the Splunk side, it was the heavy forwarder,
Right.
doing all that. And then as much tuning on the source side as possible.
Right.
Okay, let's enable this, let's disable that. Like the ASA, for example, don't turn on debug, find the specific events we're looking for and elevate them.
But that took a lot of work, though. I mean, imagine trying to manage tens of thousands of endpoints.
Oh, no kidding. And way more. And, DevOps has been around how long? Ansible, all those tools have been around, but they're not ubiquitously deployed at places. So you'd still go into a SMB, a larger SMB, and they'd still have manual editing of all their firewalls. They don't have a central repository. So you'd have
you got to love that. And
yeah.
let's start talking about all the switches and routers too.
Oh yeah. Don't even start on all the routers and switches you have to deal with.
Right.
So it becomes very hard. And that's where Cribl is awesome. Just turn on the data, send it to Cribl, and then default route dev null. I mean, we're talking about a lab we're working on right now, recreating all things, and it's putting in Cribl at the first point. All data goes into it from all the different lab devices, different things people are testing. Just put in this default system as your syslog, as your receiver, and we're going to take any of the data in. Comes in default route to null. And then as we're testing in labs and testing with other stuff, we can pull out streams
Exactly.
and skip the dev null, send it to a new technology, say, hey, I want the ASA stuff, or I want the Cisco stuff, or hey, I want to play with some of these metrics here, anything like that, and we can,
Exactly.
route it wherever you want, route it to a new tool while still going to the old tool. And talking about data growth, just, do you need this data? Let's send all this data in so we keep it in. Well, we don't need to process it, but we need it raw, unmodified logs for choose your, why can't I think? Regulatory compliance.
Right.
Send it to an S3 bucket. Doesn't Amazon on-prem, just send it off to the bucket. Data lake with Cribl, and then if you need to get it, you can re-ingest it back through Cribl to whatever source you want, but you don't have to use your license or your processing power. You can just
a question for you. So, I mean, are customers seeing value? And so, like, think about like an ASA log, to be able to very selectively say, like a stub log. So it's coming from a ASA cluster. So being able to say, okay, I don't want the stub logs, or I don't want the admin messages. They're really finding value in being able to be that selective about what gets into their SIM and what they park in object storage.
I think so. The ones I've run into and talked to, yeah, they've loved that ability. The one that took the most, or could use the most value from it, they haven't deployed it. I've been talking to them about it. They actually use very low level debug. They're not doing security. They're just doing ops.
Right.
They're using some very low level, but because of how they're set up in HA, they get duplicate messages.
Yeah.
So double the log, double the transactions, double the storage and retention. So
That's painful.
It's painful. But if they send it through, they
too.
could be deduping it and only having a single one. And then
Exactly.
how much of your debug data from any type of HA pair is heartbeat information.
Yeah.
Which security-wise, you don't need to really log. I mean, it's always nice to have information. SOC analysts, threat hunters, they want every little piece until they figure out what's going on and can write up a mapping of how to detect something. They want to see everything. So in test environments, of course, but in production, you want to reduce that extraneous information going into your security logs.
One thing I want to ask you was, so are you seeing a trend where your customers are starting to split out their analytics from their SIM into two different platforms?
In the larger companies, yeah. Unfortunately, in a lot of CDW's core bread and butter historically has been SMB. We do have a large number of enterprise customers, but a lot of the SMB markets, they haven't gotten to that growth point yet. When they do, though, this is where Cribl's positioned to help them extensively, because, okay, this data, we don't have to do anything. We just put Cribl in place and we keep it flowing this way. And now we can start doing stuff out to this.
It's just really tough doing your SIM detection response and your analytics use case in the same tool. It's you have different workflows, different use cases, and making everyone happy is very difficult. And that's why I'm just such a big proponent of splitting it up.
It is. I mean, if you're a small 5-man shop,
okay, yeah, different story there, right?
Different story there. But if you're running national and you have a SOC team, you don't want them working or interfering with your DevOps team for your infrastructure monitoring and hitting queries that then are stopping all the alerts on any downtime. You want all those to have high priority, just why you want all the security events to have high priority. And when all of them are high priority, well, there goes all your compute.
Exactly.
So yeah, it is something we talk to our clients about, and the ones that are in that maturity level most definitely are looking that way and starting to do it.
Can you tell me what your customers are doing with enrichment? How are they struggling, and how are they using Cribl to solve some of those problems?
That one I honestly don't have too much experience with directly. So this is going to be anecdotal or
hey, stories are the best story. It's all good.
Truthfully, it's just knowing.
Right.
The problem is a lot of the customers I have dealt with are all at the same maturity level, and they're truthfully just entering the scene market. They've had it, but now they're trying to learn how to use it and what benefits it comes. So they got the basic stuff in there, but the enrichment is really the big part of it that they need to learn. So getting Cribl put there is the starting point. You know, okay, we can put in Cribl. Now we can start getting in your extra information on these attacks, what they map up to, what they line up to, you know. But I'll be honest, a lot of clients still struggle with the CIS and Rule 1. Have an accurate CMDB.
Yeah, assets are everything. If you don't know what you have, that creates its own set of challenges.
When I was on the InfoSec team, it got to a point that I just started by default including it in every report I sent out to people was DNS, DHCP do not match. Because I'd query a system by IP, get a DNS name, query the DNS name, and it'd be a completely different IP. It's like trying to track down an attack against that device that reports, it's going to be really hard. And then finding out what user is on that device or who's it assigned to, what location. Yeah, that's helping that with Cribl, getting that data, helping them get that data in is one of the first things I start with a lot of these engagements when we do any seat, not just Splunk on my team, but the other ones is, hey guys, accurate database, accurate asset information, and make sure everything knows about it.
And that brings up a really good point. The another thing I see constantly is companies will make enormous investments in EDR tools that then also produce very accurate data, especially around assets like you just mentioned. But then they don't take that data and put it into their SIM, and more often not because it's just too expensive. And one of the things I really enjoyed working with customers is being able to use Cribl to say, all right, I'm going to take that 10 to 15% of my EDR data that around assets, identity, compromise, threats, and put that in my SIM and put the rest of it in my data lake. Are you seeing companies that are struggling to take advantage of their EDR data?
Oh, for sure. There's so much there. And so I run into companies that they have the SIEM set up for, you know, they're getting their authentication source, Active Directory, Azure AD, et cetera, their firewall logs, VPN logs. And then I'm like, okay, what about your EDR logs? Oh, we have them in their own security portal. So FireEye, Helix, for example, Cortex XDR. That one comes in a little bit more often, but they have that totally split out into a separate one, and there's no connection back into the SIEM.
Yeah, so there's never a need to correlate that data with your SIM. I mean, that never comes up. I'm sure. I'm being facetious.
Oh no, not at all. No, we never deal with that. But you look at the analysts, and they have two windows up.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
And it's like, how do you? And then you have to copy from each one. Why are you not doing it? So yeah, the connection with the Cribl connection, setting it up and getting it back in a reduced exactly what you need state, host name, asset, location, IP, MAC, any of the identifiable information, and not any of the extras. Like business use it can be helpful, but you know, you don't need to know last time it was up. Well, I guess actually I do like to know the last time it's updated. So a lot of that information, but
not all of it. I mean, and that's the thing is just because asset and identity is everything. And so by being able to have really accurate asset, that just makes your response so much better.
No, it speeds it up because you don't have to take the time to track down who we are, what building you're in, what state you're in, or
where you are, what you are, who supports it, what application's running on it. All those million questions that you need to have an answer to now.
Yeah, you click it, one thing, okay, this is what the system should be. Here is what is recorded, what it should be, but now we have this extra app that has appeared. We got an issue, shut it down.
It's even more fun when your DNS and DHCP are really turning over really fast and they don't match.
Oh, yeah, that's a common one. And like I said, that's why I started putting that in reports right away, because it's like, hey, you just got this alert for this host name. You looked it up. You got this IP address. You found the port. You shut down that IP address.
Wrong host name.
Wrong port. You just, you just shut down a server. Oops. Oh, yeah. For any timely response, you have to have accurate data.
Absolutely. It's so important. So let's talk about data formats. So just a common example. So let's talk about PowerShell or Sysmon. Do you run into those kind of data sources very often?
Constantly. Sysmon is, I'm a fan of Sysmon. I love it. I like the data format a little bit better than PowerShell. PowerShell is just a huge amount of white space.
Ugly, incredibly ugly.
Yeah. Not to mention any Windows format. Truthfully, logging is that. A lot of times I deal, honestly, most of the stuff I'm dealing with is Syslog. Well, Syslog. We all know how each little vendor has their Syslog deployment, and you're like,
yeah,
oh.
I mean, yeah, so there's RFC syslog, and then there's just garbage over UDP, and unfortunately, most of it is garbage over UDP. Yep.
I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah,
but
with a bad timestamp, but yeah.
There's some out there that have just really weird. And it's like, why did you even deploy this way? But yeah, Sysmon and PowerShell, being able to filter out the white space and just getting it to key value pair to send it into whatever scene, whatever logging tool you need. Just staying agnostic here, just getting it into the simplest, smallest form is fantastic.
I remember the first time I saw Cribl stream a long time ago, and I was able to turn Sysmon into JSON, and I almost fell out of my chair because I was like, it's smaller, it's the same data, it's more digestible. So less license, less hardware. I can query it faster. I can find the data faster. It fits right in. So I was like, wow. I mean, I think that's an example of you, like with Sysmon, you have data, but it's in such a rough format. Trying to search Sysmon in a raw XML format at scale is not the easiest thing in the world.
Dealing with stuff on the command line, JQ is fantastic. XML grep sucks.
Yes.
XML is
the worst.
It's better than other standards that have been out there. You know, for configuration information, looking at .ini files. XML is great, but for a log transport, yeah, can't love it. Don't love it, I should say. Not to look at Catalina, anything with Java.
There you go.
Multi-line, massive block of text. That's a lot of it is initially not that useful. I mean, the last little bits and then depending on how you break it down, it can be helpful. Sending that through Cribl and getting it down to as close to key value pair as you can instead of this big block of multi-line text that you have to parse through.
Totally. Oh yeah, it's too funny. What's the old joke about XML is not fit for people or machine?
That's like the Perl, the only language that looks the same before and after RSA encryption.
There you go. I still can't read it. Yeah, and those are just examples. I mean, and PowerShell is another example of the format may be less to be desired, but it's just like half the data, like you have start session, stop session, is completely useless. And so how do you format and how do you want the over-the-shoulder logging of the actual execution, but what about everything else? And so how do you make those choices about what can you keep, what do you don't keep? And those are the things I found especially powerful.
Yeah, you want the start session, stop session. You sort of want some of that if you're doing like development and you're looking at it looking at it in the logs on the device, but you don't need it from the device being sent to your logging system for incident tracking or your security system, or if you're doing observability, you just need the metrics from the execution of the session. You don't need to say start session and what is it, like 20 stars or whatever it is.
Yeah, and that's all it says is I've started something. It's like, yay.
You need a start timestamp. Start time, end time, timestamps, done. That's all you need in the logging system. So turning it into from human readable into machine readable is key.
So are you seeing anything innovative or interesting right now? Because I mean, I'm always interested in PowerShell logging. It's so powerful, but it gets so little attention. So what do you see? What are you seeing there?
Unfortunately, I'm not on the Microsoft side, so I can't really say what I see. But I know those guys are constantly doing stuff with customers with all the custom development for whatever they need to get the logging from. But again, still, it's from the security side, it's still something I'm not seeing enough deployment of. Like I said, there is so much that can be done there, but it's not turned on because it's too much data.
Right.
It all goes down to data volume. And we don't see as much security logging enabled like we want because of said volume. So people are
Exactly.
disabling it because, oh, I can't deal with that. I can't ingest it. So
Yeah,
truthfully,
very
are we
chicken
seeing
neck.
a lot being done with it? Not as much as we want to, not
Exactly.
as much as we need.
Hmm. Yeah, and those are hard problems, and that's so. Let's just kind of go into the strategies. So let's talk about little strategies. So before we talk about tools, let's think about strategy of how do you manage data volume, data quality to get the best results for security. So does the CDW team have any recommendations? How would you get started with a new customer?
Well, the very first thing I ask a new customer is one, compliance. What regulatory compliance do they have that they have to meet? So we know right there, we know what type of logs we have to retain, so we can get and how long they need to retain it. Then, unfortunately, usually the next one on the side is, what system are they using and what's the ingestion license.
Right.
And then we get started. And first one always is perimeter. So you want your authentication sources, your MFA sources, and then you want your, VPNs. Everybody wants their firewall logs for connection denies. And I'm like, on the outside, anything coming in that's being blocked, don't really care. I want connections from outbound to know. And then you just start bringing in all your security tools. And the MITRE ATT&CK framework is fantastic.
Right.
And looking at the MITRE ATT&CK framework and saying, okay, I need this data. And that's usually where we start. We look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, we look at the business and what vertical they're going to be in. So what common threat actors have gone after them, and then see, okay, here's the common attacks you have. So we need visibility from these sessions or from these services, systems, areas. Unfortunately, one of the ones that I find incredibly helpful in threat hunting, our IR team has found it incredibly helpful to see when things happen, are internal flow logs, connection
Right.
tracking.
To talk about another type of data, type of very voluminous data source.
Oh yeah. And again, ties into Sysmon. Sysmon has it. So you have host-based connection tracking with Sysmon, or your EDR of choice. I got a fun one on that. And then you have it at the network level. So having both of them, which a lot of times people don't have it on the network level because it brings in so much data, but
Right.
getting in through Cribl and then getting in at least the very basic points, if it's not strictly if it's not strict net flow, which is
Right.
very poignant and doesn't have a lot of extraneous data, but if it's just connection logs based in plain text, that parse that down, get it down, and then we can track that. So it's usually based upon, like you said, compliance regulations. Do they have any? Then how long do they want to go back? Usually we try and do a year, or recommend a minimum of a year.
So what's behind a year? Is that dwell time or is that something else?
I don't know the reasoning. This is what I've done from the IR team. They say when if you can get data and an attack happens, being able to go back a year, you usually can get a baseline of an organization.
Right.
So they can see peaks and valleys when they're looking at network traffic, processes, different things that happen at different times over the past year. And if you look at a point in time and can look back, well, actually it's like 13 months. So you can look back at this day, this point in time, how was the environment responding at this time last year? And then you can see anomalies. Now, again, security-wise, more data is better if you have clean data. Let's
Right.
caveat. Good data, but if you have historically good data, the longer you have history for, the more you can spot trends, the more you can spot anomalies. So they want more data, but again, data volume, not all our clients can.
Right.
So being able to parse it down, get just the bare minimum stored, and then archive stuff off or not in that seam, and then re-ingest it from the data lake if you need it, is super handy.
Nice. That's pretty good. And just one little piece of advice we talk about retention. Not all retention requires you to keep that data online, something I had to figure out the hard way. So we made sure we would park that data somewhere so we had it, but we didn't necessarily keep it online because of that, especially help with that cost issue.
Oh, it does, for sure. You don't have to keep all that data online. You just have to have it. You have to be able to get it. So it
Right.
can be, honestly, it can be written to tape and put in a backup site.
Well, that's why the Cribl replay is so helpful because you can just pull it and it never hits your sim, it never hits your system of analysis and makes things a lot simpler. One thing I want to ask you, do you have strategies around network configuration management, endpoint configuration management, where you try to standardize that data across your clients' host endpoints?
Yes, there the teams that do that. When they do big deployments, they try to, just looking at, so two off the top of my head, Cisco and Palo Alto,
Right,
using Panorama or FMC, trying
right.
to get standard config, standard data, everything sending the same logs. So you don't have one device sending debug, one only sending error, but everything standardized is critical. And then, your XDRs, your EDRs,
Right.
take your name of it for this year, process information, trying to get them in the same. You still run into, I don't know how many organizations there, it seems to be very common that you have multiple endpoint detection. Yeah, the servers usually have one and workstations have another. Making sure they're both getting the same level of information,
Right.
maybe a little bit higher on the workstation side because you have the person at the console doing some other things. They're web browsing, so you're going to get some extra information. Where a server shouldn't be, you really shouldn't be seeing too much web browsing traffic off of that.
I
But
happen to see one org that was running two EDR solutions, and I'm still not really sure why.
on the
Yeah.
workstations,
No, on the server. They were running two EDR solutions on the workstation, which I thought was interesting.
oh wow, I'm amazed they actually worked. But on that, I've run into this now twice, and I loved it. EDR solution and Sysmon.
Yep, and there you go. I see that all the time, and there's a good reason for it because when you shim the EDR and knock it offline, you need that sysmon to detect that.
Exactly. And the
Yep.
client that I really liked how they set it up, they had each of them monitoring each other. So the
Right.
Sysmon had specific configurations to monitor the EDR solution, and the EDR solution had specific configurations to monitor Sysmon. And if either one went offline, it would send the log would go through and
Oh
send
yeah,
an alert.
it's great. I like it a lot. One of the things I'm also seeing is that companies are starting to use their EDR to collect their endpoint logs, and so that way they're not having to ship them too. And so I think that's is an interesting way of trying to drive detection and response with less data. And so it's I still see some differences of opinions, but I thought that was an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, and like Cortex, FireEye, a lot of
Mhm.
those, they have their own CrowdStrike. They have their own, what do you want to call it? Well, I guess it's an EDR for a SIEM for EDR. So
Right.
they have all these. Now you can send all that data into your SIEM, or you can leave it in there, but still send the alerts back into your SIEM. So you have
Right.
some correlation going back to that asset information. So you're having all this other information in your SIEM, and then you get an alert from your EDR. You can track it with whatever else is going on, get those net flows, get the DNS query logs, get it all together, the information that's not in the EDR component, but you did get the alert from the EDR. Now you can
Right.
correlate it and have, instead of having to do things side to side. And that again, have with the Cribl routing, being able to take all these different systems and put them together. I love that ability.
Exactly, and I think it also helps companies get more value from all their other security tools. Companies spending way too much money on too many tools and aren't getting full value. So being able to pull your EDR solution, pull your logs from your EDR solution into your SIM, you get more value.
Yeah, for sure. And the big one that I had, marketing term, single pane of glass.
Yep.
You all see the pretty boards in the Knox and stuff that show all that, but for a security analyst, that's not really what they're looking at. They're
Not at
doing
all.
searches. And when they're doing searches and digging into stuff, they need to be able to pull data from all sources in one place so they can correlate every IP. I search an IP. I want the same data from all the systems about this IP. I don't want to have window 1, window 2, window 3, window 4 of all the different solutions that are on a company to look at and try and correlate between all these. You want it in one place. Being able to get alerts from all the other systems makes it so much easier to track something down, quicker response time, which means, less downtime, on observability, less downtime, on security, less, mean time to resolution.
Exactly. Faster detection, faster response. And that's where that context matters, because even when you get the alert, what does it mean? You remember all those questions we went through, and adding that context helps your analysts drive the response so much faster.
Yeah, knowing what's the purpose of this machine, what should be doing it. Is this a user workstation, or is it a database server? If it's a database server, why is it going to the web page, and what's going on here? Just for
why is it making connections to a server in Russia?
Those are. Well, I don't know. Is Russia still? Yeah, I guess Russia's still. I mean, it goes all. 1 month it's China, 1 month it's Korea, 1 month it's Russia.
Yeah.
I just looked at mine, and I was getting a ton of connections from Brazil, and I'm like, what's going on down there? They're all being blocked, so I'm not too worried. But
right, it's a big deal. So let's wrap it up and summarize. And so I think we walked. I mean, we've discussed that process that the CDW team brings when you're engaging with a customer, and you start with their data. You have, what do you have? What are you going to do? How do you standardize it? Because that drives the end result.
Exactly. And well, going back to your other question earlier, what are you trying to accomplish? That's the first one. Are we looking at security, or are we looking at observability? Are we looking at both? If we're looking at both, can we split it out, like you said, to 2 different systems?
Right.
And they don't even have to be the same type of system. You could have Sumo Logic, Elasticsearch, Datadog, Exabeam. You can have all of them. It doesn't matter. So if you want the same, and then you have less agents too with Cribl Edge.
Exactly.
You want the data for your observability team, and they chose their product. Your security team says, no, this product's superior for our needs. So the teams can get a product that fits their needs,
right,
instead of settling for something that sort of meets everybody's needs. So your specific teams can get the product they need, but then you can use Cribl to route the data to each of them and get the same data from the same devices with, less agents if everything works for Cribl through Edge, or just through Syslog, or, choose your connection.
I don't know about you, but in my IT career, I've been doing this for a little while. I have the gray hair to prove it. I think the thing that you're used to constraints, you're used to having a compromise. And that the thing that struck me when I first saw a Cribl stream way back when was I didn't have to compromise. That I could pull in the data, and I could put the data I needed wherever I wanted to. I didn't have to worry about what my vendor would support. I could do whatever I needed to do. And that ability, it's like what I call choice and control. I mean, that to me, that's Cribl's superpower, is choice and control to do what you need to do.
Yeah. Goes back to the debug log and stuff like that. You can individually tune each endpoint, or you can set up a collector that says, send me all the data. And at the first, you can set, like, the default route for any new source is send it to dev null.
Right.
So anybody, you don't have to worry about the systems admin team setting up anything. They have a standard procedure that I set up a new device, it automatically starts sending to this. And then you go to the security team, says, oh, a new device got onboarded. Okay, what are we going to do with the data? What data do we need out of that device? You don't have to go back and forth, do custom configurations. You just say, give me everything. Handle it first, dev null, like I said, and then pick and choose what you need. Like I said, exactly what you need, not, okay, you guys don't want to send me that much data, or you can't send that data, so I'll deal with what I have. And then you try and fumble along and make a band-aid solution.
Exactly. And as I was mentioning, you don't have to compromise. And that's something that's just, it just blew my mind. So anything any closing words?
Give me all your data.
There you go. So I really appreciate everyone's time. Really appreciate your time. I hope you'll come back soon. Please bring friends. Please bring the rest of your team. we definitely want to hear what what you have to say.
Great. Thank you, Ed, for having me today.
Yep. So 1 second. I'm going to think for all of our users, if you have questions, please, we're on social media. Please engage with us through Twitter, LinkedIn, also the Cribl Slack community, cribl.io/community. We're always welcome to talk. We're here to help. So thank you. We'll be back again soon. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.